The oldest and strongest human emotion is fear. And the oldest and strongest type of fear is trepidation of the unknown. When we were children, our parents told us that monsters didn't exist. But we were sure that something was lurking under the bed or in the closet. Fear sees even if our eyes are closed. Welcome to the realm of the arcane. My name is LON STRICKLER. Join me as I examine unexplained creatures, strange manifestations, and remarkable realities. Imagine this next hour as a voyage of discovery to strange lands, seeking not for new territory, but for new knowledge of the supernatural. Come on board as we begin this adventure together. Hey folks, good evening and welcome to another episode of Arcane Radio where we explore the unexplained live on Beyond Explanation. I'm your host, LON STRICKLER, coming to you within the cannon shot of the hallowed fields of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Now, thank you for joining me. Now, Arcane Radio and Beyond Explanation channel are made possible by you liking, subscribing, and sharing our programming. Super chat donations are essential for us to continue offering you our unique content. Your consideration is very much needed and appreciated. Now, tonight, our guest is Mike Robinson, and it was at the tender age of 7 that Mike Robinson penned or penciled his first story, The Aliens That Invaded My Backyard. A runaway international bestseller, it went on to win the World Fantasy Award, Hugo Award, and was shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize. He later became an author of multiple books. Mike is a native of Los Angeles, where he became a screenwriter and producer, not to mention co-editor of the magazine Literary Landscapes for the Greater Los Angeles Writers Society from 2011 to 2018. A short film he co-wrote, Chrysaline, debuted at the Louisiana International Film Festival in 2016. And his feature film, Corral, a psychological supernatural thriller, is working through post-production. So, Mike, thanks for joining me this evening.
Hi, Lon. Thank you so much. I should clarify really quickly that those accolades that you read, those were a joke. Because I noted that those accolades were also the product of my imagination at the time.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, you got a good imagination. That's great.
In case anyone else is wondering, like, wait, he won the Booker at 7? Yeah.
Well, we talked a bit before the show, and you and I, it's funny. You and I are kind of on the same wavelength when we're talking about cryptids and such, and supernatural and unexplained.
Sure.
Of course, you've been writing novels in reference to a lot of this type of activity. So what got you really started or interested in the unexplained?
It's a good question, because I think it just sort of happened organically. When I started writing, I was big into sports, and I started writing sports stories, and then I started reading Stephen King and R.L. Stine and Ray Bradbury and others, and I just never looked back in terms of subject material. And like the book that, or the little handwritten short story that you mentioned, The Aliens That Invaded My Backyard, I wrote that when I was like 8, something like that. And then eventually just I kept writing and loving to write, and I received I think in about 5th grade, 6th grade, I received as a Christmas present The Unexplained, which one of Carl Schuker's books, and the illustrated guide to the world's normal and paranormal, or supernatural and paranormal events, and that became a huge influence in terms of just wealth of possible material for me to draw from. And of course, the X-Files came along, and then I would see a number of movies and read a number of books. And eventually I sold my first story at age 19, and then just kept writing, trying to write a book a year, some better than others. And then eventually sold my first novel when I was 27, and have just been actually, and that was Skunk Ape Semester. That was the first edition of Skunk Ape Semester that I sold as my first publication of a book length story. And then I've just been publishing ever since.
Hmm. Well, Skunk Ape Semester, I looked over it and I was reading a lot of the different accounts in there. What's the nexus of that? What got you started in actually, first of all, were you involved in any of the story plots?
So it's a fictionalized account of a road trip. So that I guess I would say that the nexus of the story is a road trip that this professor takes with a couple of graduates to places of various strange repute. So he's a zoologist, and because of an encounter in Florida with a skunk ape when he was a child, is also a somewhat closeted Bigfoot researcher. And so he kind of does that on the side, and he has his own thing. And then he has a bit of a health scare, and he's always wanted to take a road trip to Bigfoot hotspots and other strange hotspots around the country. So he takes a sabbatical and has a couple of recent graduates accompany him, and they bounce around the country. And it's not one thing I really wanted to do with this book is to treat all the cryptids and the phenomena seriously and sober-mindedly. I didn't want to, because so much Bigfoot fiction is just jaws with claws, or furry jaws, running from this rampaging monster or something like that. And I wanted this to be a little bit more just literary, for lack of a better word, and psychological and philosophical toward the subject of Bigfoot's existence or quasi-existence, however one wants to put it. But it's also a collection of stuff that I've sort of massaged fictionally from my own road trip that I took to a lot of these spots, as well as just a synthesis of other people I've talked to in Alaska when I was there on a separate trip, and other places, in Northern California, about and just random encounters I've had with people who've expressed to me that they've had experiences with the strange, and particularly Bigfoot. I mean, he's kind of the Sasquatch is kind of the linchpin here, but
he's the 800-pound gorilla.
Right, exactly. Yeah, Gigantopithecus or any other thing that you want to. But but I also touch on sky beasts. I touch on the Dover demon. I touch on the reptilian man from the South Carolina area. I touch on vortexes, and
the skateboard lizard man.
Yeah. Right, yeah, the lizard man. Yeah, and the Kelly goblins, and Champ in Lake Champlain. So a number of things.
Well, you and I talked a bit before the show, and you did hit on one area that's very familiar with me, which is the South Mountain area, more specifically the Michaud State Forest and the Caledonia State Park, which are exactly 20 miles west of me. You got to go to Gettysburg, and they're on the other side of Gettysburg. But especially people who live in this area, and of course, one of my investigators and friends, Timothy Renner, he's got an investigative research area in Michaud. So I hear a lot about what happens out there. Plus,
oh, that's cool.
I've had reports for 30 years, about what happens in the area. But, sure. You talked about under the premise of being so close to the Appalachian Trail. And that's something, it's interesting. And you brought that up because that's something I've always wanted to do, get a survey of people who travel up and down the Appalachian Trail and some of the encounters they have. Now, occasionally I will get one that, they will talk to me about. Somebody will tell me about something. But it does happen, and I think there's a lot more that happens out there. That's what actually reported.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I find that's. Not that I've done my due diligence, but I find it interesting that we have a number of books about people conquering, the Triple Crown, the three big hikes in America, or the Appalachian Trail. But to my knowledge, we don't really have a collection of bizarre or paranormal stories, or an anthology of true testimonials from hikers who've encountered weird things along those hikes. I think that would be a really interesting collection.
I think it would too. And I don't know if I've got enough to make a book, but
right.
I've got several I've had over the years, a lot of different stuff too. I mean, you're talking about Bigfoot and weird humanoids and the phenomena they call a knot deer. A lot of other weird stuff. And I was telling you that the hot spots seems to be the area between the George Washington National Forest down in West Virginia, which is not far from the Skyline Drive, north up in through Maryland, Pennsylvania, in through Micho, and up into Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. Now, there's been several murders on the Appalachian Trail.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And there have been some that haven't been, concluded. I mean, especially down in Virginia. And there are people who swear that a wild man or a Bigfoot or something have been responsible for some of those, though you really don't know.
Sure.
But, the Appalachian Trail seems to I don't know, it seems to attract a lot of bad people and a lot of strange phenomena.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Bigfoot, I know, has been known to trash cabins and things like that. But,
absolutely.
Yeah, I don't. I wouldn't be able to say what mysterious deaths he might be responsible for, but I imagine that wouldn't even be. They'd probably go missing. Like, I don't even know if they would find a body if that were the case.
Well, there have been times when people are just going missing, and of course, there's a lot of theories on that. With the missing 411,
right? Yeah,
all that. People just
that's a rabbit hole.
Fall off. Exactly, fall right into a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of conjecture there. But I believe in the areas that we're talking about, in particular with the Appalachian Trail, in this part of the country, I think if it's not human related, I think it's possibly a Bigfoot or an upright canine. And down in that George Washington National Forest, I know there have been 3 deaths, and at least one that's been unexplained.
Wow. Okay.
And they just really don't know what it was. I mean, I've talked to several rangers down there, and they have seen their share of weird stuff. So but honestly, I haven't talked to any of the rangers up in Micho. They've been doing a lot of work up there lately, and a lot of the park has been refurbished.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I it's interesting. I went up there. I was up there about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I went, as you come off of Route 30 onto the Pine Grove Furnace Road, you go right into Caledonia, and they've got all kinds of buildings and stuff in areas where we used to camp at. So they've done a lot of refurbishing up there. It's not like it used to be, though. It's still such a mysterious place. I told you that Pine Grove Furnace Road or Pine, I guess that's the name of it. I can't exactly remember, but that goes north up into an area called Mount Holly Springs. But it goes past Laurel Lake, Fuller Lake, and a few other areas. Been a lot of cabins along that road. And we have had dogman, upright canine, Bigfoot sightings all up and down that road for years now.
Oh wow, okay,
yeah. So I mean, it's a strange place.
What are some of the leading theories behind the dogmen and the nature of them? And you mentioned werewolves when we were talking earlier, but they seem distinct.
Yeah. I think. I told you earlier that when the Pennsylvania Dutch, a lot of these farmers that came from the old country moved in this area. And when they first came here, they lived in Pennsylvania, but a lot of them moved down into Western Maryland. And for a while, especially back in the 60s, there were a lot of upright canine and what they attributed to being werewolf sightings.
Sure, right.
They were actually calling it the Dueo. That was the name they were using. And there were 7 very well-known encounters in Frederick County, Maryland, for back in the early to mid 60s. But then we started getting sightings up here. Now there were some historical sightings. a lot of logger sightings that had encounters with these things, miners. Of course, they have a lot of old coal mines around here as well. But in recent years, we've been getting just sightings of these beings just showing up. Now, I'll be honest with you. I think for the most part, these are supernatural beings. I really
Right.
do.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Because I wonder if they might be broadly categorized as Fae or among the Fae realm.
That's a good question.
I have a very good friend who's sensitive to the supernatural, and she sees non-human things as well, and a lot of the times they take on kind of animal characteristics.
That's a good question. I might have to consider looking into that because we do kind of get into the elemental type of realm and stuff. I'm intuitive myself, so I've had a lot of incidents that I've had happen to me. But some of these sightings of these things, just one in particular was up in Blair County, Pennsylvania, not far from Altoona, where these gentlemen were traveling late at night. They were part of a band actually, and they were traveling at night about 2 a.m, and they saw this thing on the side of the road, looked like it was eating roadkill. And they looked at it and just couldn't believe what they were seeing. But this thing had like a silver sheen to it, like it had an aura around it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and we asked them. I said, "But what are your thoughts? What do you think this?" I don't know. It just looked like it had this silver aura around it, but it looked like it was a living being. But we did notice that, and this thing looked up at it, gave it the damnedest look, and scared the hell out of them. They got out of there, and
clearly, if it was eating roadkill, it was physical.
And that's not the only time that's
feel
happened.
like quite. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
we've had things. We had those things come out in the middle of the day eating roadkill along the road, and it's just scared the bejesus out of folks. And but the first impression is, yeah, this thing's living, but I just don't know what the hell this thing was.
Yeah.
A lot of the sightings are by hunters, people who are armed, and we had one gentleman who was in a state game land up in Center County who literally walked up onto this thing. He said this thing was 9 to 10 foot easy.
Oh my God.
Standing, upright on hocked legs, muscular hocked legs. Just like, and I always attribute it to like the underworld Lycan in the movies, the underworld.
Right.
The way he described this thing was almost exactly like this.
Wow.
And he said when I walked up onto it, it was behind a laurel bush. And I could see the head and shoulders and then the legs. And it just stood its ground. I had a gun on me. Now, he was upland game hunting, so he had a shotgun. But, of course, he only had 6 or 7 shot in there. And he said, I wasn't going to take a shot at it. He said, I was right up on it. It just looked at me with these yellow eyes. And it was almost like, you hear with a lot of these Bigfoot stories with the possible I don't know, some type of communication with between like the human and the being
quality or something.
Yeah, like back off, or I'm not going to hurt you, but just back off. And he said I just lowered my gun and backed away. I didn't turn my back on it, but I backed away from it. But they do have a tendency to just stand their ground. They don't seem to be afraid. I had another hunter who was up in just north of the Tuscarora Forest, who was in a deer stand along the edge of a field in the woods, and he said he saw these 2 wolf-like creatures chasing this deer up on the ridge in front of him, and eventually one of them came sauntering up to him, a quadruped, and just sat down and was stood, looking up at him. And he said the thing looked like a freaking hyena. It's the back of it, and it was huge. Had a wolf-like head, but it was muscular. It was speckled like a hyena. He said it was huge.
Oh,
and this
strange.
Thing just looked at me. Now, he had a 30-06 with him, but again, he said, I'm up in a tree stand. I'm still not taking a shot at this thing.
Right. Yeah.
And,
I think that's quite a testimony to the power of these things and their presence. That, these hunters that, clearly know the woods and know how to use their weapons are just not going to take a chance.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I have never had an account that I know of, other than maybe one out in Greene County, where somebody's taken a shot at one of these things. We have a gentleman by the name of James West, who's probably in the chat tonight. I don't know if he is or not, but he's had 2 encounters in Greene County. Pretty harrowing encounters. But those are probably the most harrowing that I've heard of. Most of them are either, these things appear, you back away. This guy in the tree, he set up a tree for 2 hours after the thing walked away. He said, I wasn't going to get down off a tree and make a run for the car. He said, I was going to make sure this thing was gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
wow,
that's the kind of stuff we're getting. I mean, so as far as what they are, I guess it's anybody's guess, but I still think there's a very strong possibility that there's supernatural aspects to these things. And
could they have been something like dire wolves? I know that there have been prehistoric like creatures, like the American lion, that have been spotted throughout the country.
Right. It's interesting you said that, because we do hear accounts, and I've heard it from other investigators as well, where somebody will be some places in a park or something with their pet, and something will just literally manifest like it's coming from another time period, some type of time slip or something.
Right.
I know one account, a woman in I think it was in San Francisco. She was walking her dog in a park, and a friggin' saber-toothed tiger manifested in front of her.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Nick Redfern told me he actually had it in one of his books.
Oh wow.
I talked about it. He said, I said, he said, I hear that a lot. These things just literally manifest. So who knows what the hell's going on?
That's very strange. It's like a quantum hiccup or something.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's, I just feel at this point now, which we really don't know much about it, unless I'm not saying we're going to have a body or anything at some point. Even like with a Bigfooter, I don't think we're going to have a body anytime soon. But they just seem to show up at the damnedest times. I had an encounter back in 1988 down in Maryland, Sykesville, Maryland, and I didn't know what the hell I was looking at. Honestly, I wasn't into cryptids at the time. And, but this thing just walked out of the bushes, and it looked like an early man, looked like a Neanderthal or something to that effect. It was about 8 foot tall, but it looked more like a man than any type of other primate.
I think that's another reason why people tend not to take a shot at Bigfoot is because of the human-like qualities. Yeah.
Well, not only that, they don't seem to be threatening. This thing wasn't threatening, though. It was standing only about 40 foot away from me. It wasn't threatening. It just stood there and looked at me. Then after 5 or 6 seconds, it just turned on a dime and walked quickly up into the woods. So I wasn't.
Wow, that's that's incredible.
Yeah, and you never forget it either. I tell you, that was kind of the defining moment in my life, as far as. That's where I really started getting interested in cryptids. I've been investigating paranormal for many years, but that's kind of where that's kind of where the nexus of all that was. So I've had other encounters in the past, but it's,
you mentioned you heard one near the battlefield, right?
I have heard. Well, I was up in Micho. I was up past Caledonia, up near one of the reservoirs, a reservoir just north of Caledonia. And I was younger, and I was actually up there fly fishing. And it was early fall, and the weeds were really high. So I'd say the weeds were at least 6 to 7 foot high. And I had just parked the car onto an access road, got out, got my hip waders on, and had my fly rod, and started walking ahead of me because there was a small stream I was going to hit. And all of a sudden I heard something coming through the brush. I didn't know what the hell it was. It was loud too. It sounded big, and it was grunting and all kinds of stuff. And this was before I ever had my encounter. And
Wow.
I said, well, maybe it's a big dog or something. I'm not even going to take a chance. And I hightailed it back to the car and got out of there. And, that's before a time when I even was thinking about Bigfoot or anything like that. But, over the years, there have been a lot of sightings up there and a lot of encounters.
Oh, sure.
And the biggest, the one thing, and it's funny because I was up there 4 weeks ago, and the person I was with, I was telling her, I said, most of the sightings up here are along the highway at nighttime because there's a lot of deer, a big deer population up there. And people, they tend to get hit by cars and they're on the side of the road or whatever. And people see the Bigfoot, even the upright canines coming along the road, picking these things up, putting them across their shoulders and going back into the woods.
Yeah. No, I've read multiple stories about or heard, recordings of 911 calls of people reporting Bigfoot, carrying deer carcasses. Now,
yeah, we hear a lot of that out in the West. I mean, actually got photographs of these things carrying deer on their shoulders. So, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, so, they're at a distance, but you can tell, the size of this thing on a ridge or something carrying something across the shoulder. And it's, pretty good size being. So, it was funny because I did talk to, it wasn't a ranger. It was a guy who worked for the state park. I think he might have even worked for the highways. I'm not sure. But I did ask him, I said, up there on Route 30, up there in Lincoln Way, do you guys get a lot of roadkill? None. Because they're all cleaned up.
Oh, wow.
He didn't understand why. And I had to laugh at him. I said, oh, okay. But I didn't say anything. Yeah. I thought, well, they're cleaning them up pretty well.
Right.
I had a guy from Indiana who was in Gettysburg for about a week. And he was driving back home. Of course, he was taking Route 30 West. He was going through Micho, and he had one of these things jump out right in front of him. He damn near hit it, and he had to have his wife drive home the rest of the way because it freaked him out so bad.
Oh,
that was a huge Bigfoot. I mean, it was the way he described it. It was kind of. He said it was tall. He said it was kind of reddish color, but had the face of an orangutan.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it seems to tack back and forth between, the orangutan comparison, or the comparison seemed to go back and forth between human and orangutan. It's very interesting.
Yeah. There does seem to be different races of these beings. I don't know.
Right.
But of course,
subspecies could be, very easily if they're in isolation.
Yeah.
In various geographic areas. Yeah.
Well, you know about the skunk apes, and of course, those are, for the most part, those beings look nothing like anything that's seen up in the Pacific Northwest or even here in the East.
Right, exactly.
They're smaller, they're
stronger. Yeah,
kind of reddish in color. They're kind of more stocky.
Right.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, they're stringier. I think. Yeah, just their hair is.
So tell me some more about the book and some of the other encounters that you described in there, as opposed to to real situations that you kind of relate those to.
Right. So the front of the book is his kind of covers his intellectual interest in Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. The main characters, and one of the things that I thought was interesting, which I read about, and I'm curious to know if this is borne out in recent statistics at all, but in the 1970s ish era, you had an uptick in Bigfoot sightings spilling into the 80s, and there's a theory that there's a wave of curious young Bigfoot that come down from the hills to check us out. And then once their curiosity is sated, they head back into the brush, or, it's almost like a rite of passage to kind of scope out these strange human things that are making all the noise.
I have heard that theory. Now here in Pennsylvania, back in the early 70s, we had a UFO I don't know what you want to call it. It was, but
Spate
it
of
was
UFO sightings.
yeah, there was a lot of UFO sightings, especially
Yeah.
out in Western Pennsylvania. And in a couple of instances, there were Bigfoot encounters at the same time. Of course, Stan Gordon has written about that for years on the Chestnut Ridge area out Fayette and Westmoreland County.
Oh yeah.
But these stories have been well known. Now, of course, when you're talking about connections, I think there are a lot of different connections, with a lot of different aspects of the paranormal and with other beings or UFOs. I think there is a definite connection. I don't know how you handled that in the book, but I think that is true.
Yeah, right. So because he's a professor, I have him kind of compartmentalize things, and so even though he doesn't necessarily, this character doesn't subscribe to other areas of Forteana, he likens them to dirty dishes that need to be, cleared and slotted in their proper place, and different things that all can be lumped into the same ballpark. And he admits kind of the mystical connection there, or the sense of connection. I think it's regarding UFOs and that is it's definitely fascinating. I think I'm less clear on the possible connection there, than I am on UFOs and supernatural encounters. I know that a lot of people who've claimed abduction encounters have also seen dead relatives in the room, and alongside the grays and things like that. And I almost wonder if they could be pluming the interstitial reality between us and a metaphysical reality,
right?
Or extracting our memories and manifesting them in a strange way, Tulpa-like. But yeah, in regards to how I handle those connections in the book, the book is broken into vignettes, and each one kind of details, as I mentioned earlier, each one details the human consequence of an encounter. And so they pass through Texas at one point, through a small town that's being ravaged by what many think is the chupacabra.
Right.
And they don't actually, it's no big spoiler here, but they don't actually encounter the chupacabra, but you see the fallout from all that activity and the social fallout from that activity. And the question of the chupacabra's existence is left open to debate. But that's kind of where I wanted to weave a lot of the story, is like, in the being open-minded enough to assert that, hey, these things, or many of these things, do have a reality, have a presence in our world, but leaving the actual nature of them and trying to feed people answers about that, leaving that open for interpretation. Because that's what stimulates me. I love the unknown. I like the labelless. But regarding Michaud, I remember reading all about especially when I was over there, because on my road trip I did, because as I mentioned, I have friends in South Mountain area, and passed through Michaud State Forest, and talked to some people about Bigfoot encounters there, and read up on Bigfoot encounters there, and people seeing families running together, the families of Bigfoot. I don't think it was Michaud where the Jacobson photos were taken.
That was up in that was
somewhere
in Western
else.
Pennsylvania.
That was Western Pennsylvania.
Maybe Beaver County, up in that area up there, just north of Pittsburgh.
Okay, right.
Those photographs, I'm still unsure what that was.
Yeah, that was not a bear.
No, it was not a bear.
It looks like a chimpanzee.
It does. Yeah. It does look like a large chimpanzee, but no, I don't think it was a bear. I never did think it was a bear.
Right.
I've seen a lot of photographs of a bear that kind of look weird, but I don't think that was.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bears with mange or something.
No, it's funny you talk about
Yeah.
South Mountain too, because South Mountain is known for a lot of things other than just Bigfoot.
Oh,
First of all, it's known
yeah.
for witchcraft.
Oh, interesting.
There's
I actually didn't realize that.
yeah,
Interesting.
it's an area where a lot of the local witches, especially around in the 1800s, concentrated at.
I did go to psychic there once.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I didn't realize that it was a witchy place.
Well, you're going to have a lot of these witches and a lot of these psychics along Route 30 and up into South Mountain. And they do congregate there for whatever reason. I don't know if it's a tourist thing coming out of, Gettysburg. You go into Gettysburg now, you got all these ghost tours up and down the road. Right. And then you got all these psychics that have shops and such in there, as well as crystal shops and metaphysical shops, especially on
sure,
on the Baltimore Avenue coming off the square, but you get a lot of that. But anyway, it's an area that's well known for witchcraft back in the 1800s. There was a folk magic that was prevalent in this area, still is to a small degree, which was called powwowing. And also we had a lot of green witches, but we had a few, black magic and stuff. And people have talked about that for years, that where these witches would transform people, curse people and stuff up on South Mountain. We had the South Mountain Witch, which is an interesting story in itself.
Oh, wow. Really?
But during the Gettysburg campaign, during this, before the Battle of Gettysburg, the Confederate Army bivouacked on South Mountain or near South Mountain. And if you dig deep enough, you will get stories of witches and Bigfoot. And there have been some encounters, kind of said behind bated breath, but of these soldiers having encounters with Bigfoot.
Wow.
Now, I have had reports that came out of old regiment reports of these soldiers, especially in the Union Army, who had encounters with Bigfoot at certain forts and such, especially down in Virginia. But it is documented. So Bigfoot in the Civil War, that's an interesting concept in itself.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But of course, and I've told you earlier about with the battlefield, it's the battlefield at Gettysburg seems to attract a lot of different things.
Yeah. Of
course, let alone the ghost, but there's been a lot of UFO activity as well as Bigfoot activity, and that's it's a conjecture, but you think, well, with all the energy, maybe the Bigfoot is being attracted to the area. It seems like these cryptids, for whatever reason, are attracted to death or past death.
There's
hear about them in cemeteries all the time.
Right.
People go to funerals at cemeteries and see one of these things on the edge of the woods, standing there watching them. You hear about that a lot.
My the friend that I mentioned who's sensitive and can see spirits as well as non-human spirits. I was actually I didn't see it myself, unfortunately, but she saw what she is pretty sure was a Bigfoot at a distance. She saw this huge lumbering, broad-shouldered, no-necked humanoid creature cross this path just before a few people made their way across the path, and so perpendicular to it. Of course, they were walking the path, and this was walking across the path. And so she got a size comparison and could tell that it was not the size of a person. And
okay.
Her sort of, for lack of a better term, her like spidey sense went off. She gets like tingles when she sees strange things or supernatural things. And I asked her, like, so what do you? If that was a Bigfoot, like, what do you think they are? And she said, I don't know. It seemed like between the physical. It seemed like they can. It's almost like they're interstitial. Like they have a. It's like the way amphibians can go ashore and thrive in water. It's almost like the Bigfoot can thrive in the physical as well as the metaphysical, or maybe it's so adept at hiding and so at one with the forest that it's in effect like that. I mean, we could be 10 feet from it, and unless we're smelling it or it's
Right.
making noise, it can easily camouflage and hide from us. Which I've always found fascinating too, because it seems so, its behavior is just so harmonious with in harmony with the woods and the wild.
Hey, Vincent, if you want to come on and ask some questions, I see you're posting them up here. Just come on in and ask them if you want to. But you talked about the chupacabra and some of the other things you talked about. Oh, the goblins of
the Kelly goblins, right? Yeah, Hopkinsville.
What kind of variation did you have? Because I didn't read the chapter.
Oh yeah. So what I did with that one, this was my fictional license, or creative license, but I had them visit one of the last survivors of the invasion, I guess if you want to call it the encounter. The daughters, one of the young daughters of the Sutton family, and she's an old woman now, and she's tipping into Alzheimer's, and so she barely remembers the encounter, but has sort of immortalized it in a children's book that she wrote with her daughter. And so it's come to be like a bedtime story for her almost. The edges of the encounter have been softened, and in her increasingly kind of senile state, she almost sees it as a fanciful story as opposed to a terrifying story. And so I talk a lot about how we can change our consciousness about things, and so I use it to kind of delve into deeper themes that run throughout the book. They visit the old plot of land where it happened, and talk with her and her daughter. And so that's this. And then of course I have them read the children's book that she wrote about it. Right. So it's really just kind of celebrating the human element of the strange and the wondrous and the paranormal.
There's another thing you had talked about earlier with the Scape War lizard man down in South Carolina. Yeah. Lyle Blackburn wrote a book about that not too many years ago. It's a very good book. And he had talked to a lot of the witnesses down there who had reported it past after the encounter the young man had out on the road.
Christopher Davis.
Christopher Davis.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the hell that thing is. I mean, maybe there is something in that,
Yeah.
You hear about a lot of this different stuff, especially something like that, a reptilian that's out in a swamp somewhere. And you think it's crazy, but then you hear other things about it, and it happens all the time.
Right.
You and I had talked about thought form manifestation. Is it that strong that somebody's imagination could actually manifest one of these things?
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
So how'd you handle that in your fictional manner?
So I have them pass through South Carolina. And I do touch on the here and there the power of collective belief, which I certainly subscribe to. I think it would. I'm not entirely convinced that one imagination could necessarily create those things. I think it's entirely possible that the combined power of many different thought energies, or devoted, concentrated, disciplined thought can bring something about that's half physical or fully physical, at least for a temporary amount of time. So I touch on some of that, but it's really just speculation, and as it is in the book. And no, I talk about the parallels between the creature from the Black Lagoon as well, and pop culture, the overlap between pop culture and real life encounters, and I used the Lizard Man as a springboard for that discussion. Okay. Yeah.
Well, I understand that completely because, when this winged humanoid phenomena, the Chicago Mothman or whatever you want to call it, started to happen, of course, we were flummoxed about what was going on.
Yeah.
And, one of the first theories we had was, well, maybe this is some type of thought form manifestation, or, maybe it's mass hysteria of some type, or why are these things are showing up the way they're showing up? And it's always been a question. Now we're getting few more answers as time has gone by. But there's still that big question as to why they're showing up there, and what's going on. And I get that. I mean, when you're doing an investigation of any type and you're writing, and you're trying to come up with a storyline, it's difficult because you want to come up with something that nobody else has really come up with.
Sure.
But you don't want to sound like a damn nut either.
Right.
Yeah. So, I get it.
Yeah. I mean, I always, and that was one of the reasons why, I wanted to write the book. I like the framework of the road trip. One of the reviewers called it "On the Road Meets the X-Files," which is kind of an apt elevator pitch, because it has the literary qualities of or the more psychological literary qualities, and then it has the of course the paranormal stuff. I've always wanted to celebrate it, but at the same time take it all seriously, keep an open mind, have suggest degrees between the different phenomenon. Like one is maybe more likely just given biological evidence, material evidence. Others might be a little bit more fanciful, but it doesn't mean that something didn't happen there.
Right.
And so, I again, like I deliberately chose to base all the vignettes on quote unquote real phenomena, like things that people have actually experienced, that people can recognize in the Fortean world. Other books of mine, I tend to go even wilder and kind of invent my own strangeness based on
nothing wrong with that,
right? Exactly. Yeah.
I could give you some scenarios that you could probably go wild on. So
sure, yeah.
So Vincent, you got a question?
Yeah, we've got a couple questions from the chat room. Mike, have you had any paranormal activity happen in your life that you've based a lot of these stories on?
So when I wrote this book, it was pretty much all second or third hand, because I was collecting stories from people who've had cryptid encounters or strange encounters. Funnily enough, it was only relatively recently that I actually started having what you could classify as supernatural experiences, or an ongoing supernatural experience. So as I mentioned, one of my good friends, so she's actually an ex, and when we were together and she was living here for a time at my place, she's sensitive. And so I think she's sort of like a beacon for those things. Kind of
opened you up to it.
Yeah, I think so. And put me in the splash zone.
Right.
So, and I started experiencing, I guess, what you could call like fey activity, like poltergeisty type stuff, doors closing by themselves, things going missing and then showing up in a very strange place. Items just that weren't mine, just manifesting out of thin air.
Wow.
Dark energies kind of bleeding in through the walls and things like that. So yeah, that's it. And it's just, even though I'd always kind of been fascinated by those things, had kept an open mind, like to directly experience those things, it's like wow, these things actually are real.
Yeah.
And it's hard to convince someone who's very skeptical of that, I know. And I'm fairly relentless with my skepticism. I try to maintain, I just don't I don't buy it all wholesale in terms of like, oh, it's got to be something strange. I try and look for different explanations, but some of those there's absolutely zero explanation. And I witnessed it myself. There's no way that a wind could have blown the door closed, in the middle of my hallway.
Oh, sure. Right.
So yeah, it's
wow.
Yeah, but in terms of cryptids, I've unfortunately not had a cryptid encounter. I would love to have a cryptid encounter. Although one of the guys I talked to for the book said that he believes there's I forget the tribe or if it's multiple tribes, but there's a Native American belief that sometimes it's like they're like a bad omen for you. And so after his Bigfoot encounter, when he was a kid, he encountered Bigfoot in blueberry picking in Northern California.
Mm-hmm.
And he believes that it either heralded or caused his heart condition. And I who knows if that's the case.
Yeah. I've heard of stuff like that before. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Could be just some sort of natural force.
You hear a lot of those, what they call the Omaha encounters up there in Northern California, up in Oregon. And, I've heard a lot about that even in most tribes, even the Navajo have a lot of superstitions as well. But, when you really have an actual encounter, they're very cognizant of what's going on in their culture. And,
sure.
It's hard to get them to talk about it when it happens. It really is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. For very understandable reasons.
Absolutely. So, Vince, you got anything else?
Yeah, I was wondering about the alien book. Now, you said that you gathered everything through second and third hand. Have you ever experienced a UFO or anything outside while looking up?
Yes, but I'm almost embarrassed to tell it because it's so plain. I wish you were more dramatic. So I was out camping in Joshua Tree National Park out in the Mojave Desert here, and I was just stargazing, and one star that was in the center of my field of vision that I kind of more or less had my eye on just started moving and then just vanished. So it was almost like the star was there and then just and then just zipped off and then disappeared. Like it'd been hovering or something like that. And that's the extent of my what could be classified as UFO experience. My dad was a pilot for over 20 years, and unfortunately he didn't see anything.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
Really?
No, he saw fireballs and meteors and that kind of stuff, but he didn't see any UFOs. He's kind of annoyed about that.
My old man was in the Air Force, and he never had an encounter either. But he was in the 509th, which was the same group at Roswell, and this was he was there after Roswell when they were out of there. But a lot of the guys he was stationed with were ex personnel at Roswell, so he heard a lot of stories.
Oh, I can imagine.
And he maintained that, I think something happened, but I'm not going to talk about it, and I'm especially not going to talk about it with you because he knew I'd probably write about it. So.
Right.
I was able to go to a reunion one time. They used to have their reunions out at Wright-Patterson out in Daytona, Dayton, Ohio. And I went there with him one time, and some of these old guys are there, and they do talk about it sometimes. But man, you just can't get any information out of these folks. So here's and another interesting thing was his commander at the time was Paul Tibbets, who dropped the atomic bomb at Hiroshima.
Right.
So he's kind of got into a bunch of stuff when he was in the service.
Oh wow!
But he wouldn't talk a whole lot about it. He was really tight-lipped about it. So I think he knew something, but he wouldn't say much.
Sounds like he did.
Right.
And he knew me. He knew I'd write about it. So that's why. That's why I didn't get a whole lot.
I mean, here's something that kind of blew me away. That I'm sure you guys read one of the. I believe it was. I know there was the New York Times article in 2017 that treated UFOs, and then there was another one that came out last year, 2020. Right. And buried in the article, there's a paragraph that talks about, I forget which defense contractor it was, but there's a representative of a defense contractor testifying before a congressional committee about off-world vehicles and off-world technology, and that's right in the New York Times.
And you don't
And
hear
like
much
no
about
one
it.
said, no one asked like, hey, wait, off-world, what does this mean?
Yeah.
It was just like, I don't know. It was very strange that no one brought that up or no one discussed it, or like, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I know we had that
I read that,
fascination
and
with
I,
UFOs.
it's kind of been a stuck in my craw there for a while, but I really can't make head and tails of what exactly was going on there. My whole theory about these so-called disclosures with the Pentagon and such were like we were being spoon-fed some of this stuff. I think a lot of it was declassified, and to the point, look, like here's something, but we're not going to give you something that's really got some meat and potatoes behind it.
Yeah.
I think they kind of had a little bit of pressure on them by Congress and a few other folks, and they had to release something. And I think that's where a lot of that ATIP stuff came out. So I don't know. That's just my theory.
Right. That could be. It's almost like they're hoping that this will pacify us for a while, and then the subject can go to sleep or something.
Yeah. I mean, we're not going to hear anything about aliens or extraterrestrials unless something lands on the White House lawn. I mean, other than that, we're not going to hear anything. Unless we have, it's all going to be need to know, and then by that time we'll need to know, and it might be too late, but who knows? I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. I never thought we would get something even to that degree from the Pentagon, but I think they had some pressure behind it, and I think that's why we got what we got.
Yeah, I mean that could be. I already saw that. The ufology community is disappointed with how the task force is being set up and handled now, because I guess it's just happening all behind closed doors, and nothing's going to be released, and it's basically what you just said.
Well, I think this new thing that they're coming up with is going to have more money behind it, but of course it's going to be classified. You're not going to hear anything about it.
Of course, yeah.
The previous thing they were doing, the previous investigation was kind of like, we got a couple of million sitting here. We'll throw it at you. You figure out what you can find out. And, of course it got out, and but I think it might have some interest might have got behind it, and they figured, well, we're going to put it in the black projects, and we're going to throw a little more money at it, and we'll keep it top secret. So
right.
It's the government. That's how this stuff works.
Yeah. So,
Mike, tell us about what you've got planned, what you got coming up in the future, and how people can get in contact with you.
So my website is mike-robinsonauthor.com. You can find my Amazon page link there as well. I've got other books out currently, including my dark fantasy trilogy, in which I cover things like tulpas and thought forms and other stuff. That's the Enigma of Twilight Falls trilogy.
Right.
And I've also got a book, The Prince of Earth, which treats the big gray man of Ben McDewey in Scotland. Yeah.
I could go through a lot with that one. That's something I'm very interested in.
Oh yeah, I know that was something I found I came across in The Unexplained, the book by Carl Schuker. And so yeah, and I've got a few others there. I've got anthologies listed where my short stories appear. I've got one book, that Dreamshores, which is sort of my homage to Ray Harryhausen stop motion animation films.
Absolutely,
and that's a little bit more lighthearted, but it also talks about after the afterlife and things like that. So
cool.
There's always some element of Forteana. And the other book that's out too is called The Atheist, which is sort of like a fictionalized Richard Dawkins who has a near-death experience and then has to reconcile new questions with his public persona. And it's of course typical with following in line with the spirit of Skunk Ape Semester. It doesn't offer any definitive answers, so it's neither religious nor is it secular in its viewpoint. It just kind of celebrates the unknown.
Interesting. Well, I tell you, have a happy holiday, and
you too.
Want to get in contact with me? My email is open to you. Just feel free to contact me. I think you and I have a lot of good conversations in the
absolutely, yeah, for sure.
So thanks for coming on.
Of course, thank you, Vincent.
Hey, that's great.
You take care.
Take care, guys.
Yeah, I know I'm kind of some pregnant pause here. Now, if you have an unexplained encounter or setting, feel free to contact me through the Fams of Monsters blog site. I want to again thank Mike Robinson for joining me this evening, and thanks to each and all of you for watching and chatting. If you made a super chat donation, it's truly appreciated. Your support is what makes this possible. So please like, subscribe, and share. Now, next week, I had a cancellation from a guest I was supposed to have on. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have a question and answer show. So any questions on any case, but sure to join us in the chat room, and we can discuss any current past case, as well as other subjects you have on your mind. So I may also have a guest or two joining in. I know Vincent will be here. So be sure to join us for what promises to be an interesting and entertaining show. So until next week, stay healthy and have a safe, enjoyable weekend. Good night.